I think some of you may have kind of touched upon style sheets in the past. I'm going to kind of cover paragraph styles, character styles, and object styles. This is something that always surprised me when I had interns over the years, that none of them really knew how to use them. But this is one of the key things that you really need to get to grips with and really use within your kind of day-to-day, really, because the sooner you kind of familiarize yourself around the hierarchies that it creates, you coming in and working with a team, if you're doing kind of editorial work specifically, or book design or brochure design, whatever, it's just there to help you, so why wouldn't you use it? We're obviously looking here at style sheets in InDesign, but there's style sheet systems in Word, for example, or Keynote, or obviously it's used in HTML extensively. But we'll look at how you can kind of create a master set of styles that everything is derived from. So very quickly you can modify 2 or 3 things, and it gives you the opportunity to look at relationships between fonts and see what works or doesn't work. The next few pages I'll run over how I've set these up. Again, you'll have access to this file, so you can kind of use it as a tool whenever you're starting a project and you just want to have a play around with some fonts. It's a quick way of kind of giving you a little bit more information than just being on a website and seeing A to Z and the quick brown fox or a specified bit of text. If you're actually seeing it in the context of a spread, I've got a spread here, but you could extend this to a poster or an advert or whatever it is, and then use it as a tool to just help part of that decision-making process as you're trying to develop a visual language. So let's proceed. So as mentioned, paragraph styles and tips around paragraph styles, character styles, object styles, and then a few other nuggets, which we'll go over in a moment. So whenever I start a new project, I don't necessarily start afresh. I have a template document, which is kind of what this workshop document has been born out of, really, where I have a type hierarchy set up that are linked to a primary font, a secondary font, and body copy. And again, this is one way of doing it. Not every project needs 3 fonts, but it's here to demonstrate how you can approach it. Anyway, I'm not going to make excuses for why I've done it this way. It is what it is. So primary font happens to be Salt Sans Pro. Secondary font doesn't have to be the same family. In this case it is, but I've just chosen the extra light version. And then body copy, I've chosen a serif because it's more legible, it's easy to read in dense text. So before I do anything in terms of type hierarchy, these can be anything at the end of the day, because you can change them at any point. In this instance, that's what I have assigned from the outset. So I can select that font and then come here. I've already got them here, but I can just come here and say new style, new paragraph style. And I just do that, I name it, close it. I don't do anything else, I don't touch anything. And I make that a master. So just by putting it in a folder called masters, let me open up this here. So you'll see that I've just created a folder called masters, and I've got my primary font there and my secondary font. Get rid of that rogue text box. Secondary font, I don't know why it's got a plus next to it. When it's got a plus next to it, it means it's been modified. So I think it's the type size. That's all. So again, it doesn't really matter because I'm overriding it in a minute. So there we go. Primary font, secondary font, it's the style of the font. That's all I'm worried about at this stage. And from that, I make my 3 masters. Get rid of that. So primary, secondary, body copy. Primary, secondary, body copy. Style, not sizing or anything, it doesn't matter. And then, I might devise a full type system, full hierarchy. So the title might be, it says here, primary font 50 point on 55 leading. So chapter head might be 30 point on 33 leading, etc., etc. So I'm using either the primary font here and here, the secondary font here, the body copy for paragraphs and bullet points, and these are all linked to the masters. So when I've decided that I want to use the primary font at that size, I come back to here and I say new paragraph style, which will give me new paragraph style. I'll click onto it just to show you. But what I've done is I've made sure it's based on primary font. So it's linking back to my primary font selection. And that's important because if I go through systematically and create my type hierarchy, but make sure that they're all either based on primary font, secondary font, or body copy masters, because they're affiliated with those masters, if I come to the primary font and have a change of heart or open a new project, just want to have a play around with some fonts, I can come into here, and I haven't got many fonts on this machine. So I've now changed it to Adobe, whatever. My primary, because I've used primary font in this document, it changed that as well. So my primary font is now that serif, and everything that's been derived from that serif is automatically updated right through the type hierarchy. And similarly, if I change the secondary font and I want to make it whatever black version of Source Sans Pro, now everything is super heavyweight rather than it being extra light, which it was before. So my secondary font was updated. And that's all because every subsequent style sheet that I've created, I've basically based it on one of these three things. When you don't do that, you then have to come in and edit each one individually. There might be exceptions to the rule where you just create a new style sheet, and that's fine. But if you set up that kind of Uber level, then it will cascade down and automatically update across the board. Other kind of tidbits that are kind of here, just to point out why we're here. So, good practice in sort of typography is that maybe the first chapter of a first paragraph in a chapter of a book, you wouldn't have it indented, and you might have subsequent chapters indented. That depends on your kind of design approach. What you'll note is that if I select text, actually, that's not the case. Get rid of those. Let me get rid of that. And I'll show you this as an example. So it's only because I haven't set it up on the second style sheet. That will make sense in a second. So here, I'm selecting the text, but there's a gap and there's no selection. It's because that paragraph, as part of its paragraph style, has got a return, basically. It's saying add an extra line, but it's doing it through a unit of measure. If I come to the baseline grid again, on drop down, it's there already. So now I'm zooming in, it's on the baseline grid, and it's knocking it over to that next line. Say, for example, you've designed it like that, and then you get all the final copy back from the author, and the author's written way too much, and they can't sub it, and the publisher says, look, sorry, which happens, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to take out all the returns in the between each paragraphs because the author's written too much, and we can't sub it, which means edit it back to fit. So, here we've got 2 paragraphs, it's not a big deal. But in a book with 300 pages and 5,000 paragraphs, you don't want to do that manually. You want to go home at 6 o'clock, not midnight. So having set up your style sheets to work with spacing rather than adding in spacing manually, I can come to my spacing here, and this is my space after, which is a weird arbitrary figure. I know it's 12 point. If I put 12 point in there, it will convert it to 4.233. That's why it's 4.233, because the type system works on points, but it will convert it. So if I want to get rid of that line, obviously I remove the space after. It's fine, I'll just do 0, and it moves it up. It still snaps it to the baseline grid, but now across 15 chapters, all of that text has been kind of condensed, and any text that was over matter, so text that was kind of not showing on the page, will now kind of pulled in. So you can use it to style the text, but you can also style paragraphs, spacing. Here, for example, we've got just a slight variant between these two versions of the body copy. So I've got no indent for the first paragraph, and then any subsequent paragraph I use indented. So, for example, here, well, this is interesting because actually I could make that more efficient. Here at the moment, I've got it based on body copy. But if I actually based it on no indent and had the indent, so left 5 millimeters, hence that indent on the first line indent. But now that I've changed it and it's based on that paragraph, if I had, and this is the example I was trying to show, if I wanted to put that spacing back in, maybe the author hasn't written enough now, a different book. Let's hope it's not the same book. Mixed information. What? Come back, what's happened? Bear with me, no indent. No, I want that to be no indent. All right, so that's no indent. This is a paragraph based on no indent. Right, so if I now edit that, and because the indented is based on this one, it should put the spaces on this paragraph style as well. I've not updated it in there, I've updated it here, but because this is dependent referencing that, it's applying the same logic. So it's really, really powerful. But how do you apply that practically when you're styling up your text? So here you might bring in text that's Arial for demonstration purposes. Regular. You're like, okay, I need to style up the text. If fine, you can select it here and you can choose a header and you can kind of do that manually. But maybe you're kind of running through lots of pages and you want to style things a bit quicker. So here, that paragraph, I want to be non-indented. So now if I do that again. Right, let me do it again. So paragraph style. So I've used the pipette to pick up the style. I've now got that in the text. And then if I either scrub it, it should happen if I click it. Why is it not happening? It's weird. I had that working earlier. It should do the whole paragraph based on. Because here, this thing. I'll tell you why it's not doing it. It's because that isn't a full paragraph. It's got line breaks in it. So if you've got a line break halfway through a paragraph, it's not going to style the whole thing. So it has to be flowing text on a per paragraph basis. Anyway, you'll have a chance to play with that in a second. So that idea then, so here, for example, is just a single spread that I've just thrown together just to use as a tool to see how fonts are complementing each other. So, here at the minute, obviously that pull quote and that second chapter head, which is based on the second font, is all a bit heavy compared to the primary font. if I sort of deselect everything and come back into secondary font and say, actually, no, I want to revert that back to, just because I know it's lighter. So now it's updated everything that is derived from that. So that's a secondary header, and the pull quote has been updated to that font, and this header here. Just as an aside, a separate kind of thing that always surprised me when you've got interns, you know, sometimes you've got a block of text and you want to indent all the lines after the first one, so it aligns with it, but you don't want to sort of individually tab each line. If you put your cursor where you want the line to be, I think I've got space in there somehow. What's going on here? All right, let me tidy that up first. Let me go to no paragraph. So running a quote like that is kind of seen as bad practice, really. You want all the lines of text to align like that. Can you see? So it's a subtle difference, but by not having that indented, so you place the cursor where you want subsequent lines to align to, and on PC it's Control / and all three lines move. I think on Apple it's either Control or Apple. But the point is that everything shifts along with it. It doesn't kind of have these rogue spaces that will trip you up later on when you're starting to move columns of text around. Just making sure that you're kind of doing a hard tab across the paragraph. It's on a kind of paragraph by paragraph basis, but just best practice, and always make sure you're doing that with your quotes rather than not, because it looks clumsy. Okay, so you can see I've done it there and there. Anyway, that is paragraph styles, and again you'll have an opportunity to play around with that in a minute. So then character styles are something else. Character styles supersede a paragraph style. So here I'm going to actually make that header header 2. Let me change that primary font back because I preferred it as Source Sans Pro. Wherever that's gone. Is that primary font? Yeah. And then bold for the sake of doing bold, make it header 1, header chapter head. There we are. Okay. Anyway. Character styles work in concert with paragraph styles, but override settings on a kind of local basis. Where we were clicking into a paragraph and then setting the setting across the paragraph, here we're actually sort of scrubbing and selecting what we want to change. So best way of demonstrating that is finding the character style tab, which constantly disappears for some reason. Let me get rid of these and I'll recreate. No. Right, so that's paragraph style. So we'll, I think it's body copy. We'll just leave it at that for now. If I wanted, like the title of a publication. So normally the title of a publication you would always write in italics. It's just kind of visual semantics. I don't read the Daily Mail, that's the only thing I can think of. So the Daily Mail, for example, has a character style. If I come to new character style and I want it in italics, if I want it in the same font, even if I change the font, I don't put in a font family, I just literally write italics. And it will always be an italic version of the font that has been inherited from the paragraph style. So you can start seeing the relationship. Always name them. I'm very bad at doing that. Let's just do spring clean. And then, you know, maybe it's an annual report and you're wanting to highlight all the people, all the staff members somehow. So in the first sort of design, you're doing it in bold for the want of an example. Basic characters, same thing, font style bold. You can use a drop down. I just typing it in this case. I didn't name it. So bold. And now you've got two character styles. So I can just double click and do that. So fine, I've got three names in bold and a title. But character styles are a bit more powerful than that. You can also do quite sort of stylistic things. And I'll show you some examples of that in a moment. But hey, say for this, we want to highlight the word with a color. If I come back into bold, and we've got three here, so it'll kind of change in three places. No, don't do that. I have that selected, deselect. So here, if I then go strike options, strike on, make a strike of 40, I can censor certain information, or I can finish what I was doing, change it to yellow, set to overprint, and that's it. With overprinting, if you're doing any overprinting and you need to preview it in InDesign, you have to turn your separations on. Separations, yes. Right, what's going on here? No, ignore that. What did I do then? Character color, oh, that's why. Character color black. It's because I was working with the strike through option. Let me come out of that slightly and undo that. Right, strike through. I switched from strike through and then went to character color, which was wrong. So 40, fine, stop closing it, stay on strike through. So here now, if I change that to yellow, say, and overprint the stroke, now I'm highlighting all the names in the whatever, annual report, poster, social media campaign, whatever it is. But through a style sheet, no matter what type size, if I'm scaling, everything moves with it. And it's all derived within a single character style. Again, this is just a paragraph, but we're thinking about scale long run. This is just an aside, a technique that I kind of use a lot. Every time I'm designing a logo or a series of icons, I will always make it fit within 100 millimeters and touch the side. So if it's a rectangle, obviously make it the width exactly 100 millimeters. In this case, we've got a circle, so the diameter is 100 millimeters. And it's more really to kind of save you the hassle of measuring anything, but also for your clients, because if you're supplying a series of logos as an identity suite, and as we've sort of looked at earlier, they may be working in Word, and in Word, all you have is the capability of scaling to a percentage. You don't have, like we do in InDesign, scaling to a measure. So if you make sure it's 100 millimeters, if you scale it to 15%, you know it's 15 millimeters. So very quickly, you're not ever having to measure anything. You're just dealing with the percent, be it across applications. And because the source has always been 100 millimeters, it will always be the size that you're expecting without needing to measure it. By extension, you can take that idea, and in this example, I've added a green line just to visualize it, but you might have an InDesign document which is the logo at 100%, 100 millimeters, And then you might include from the brand guidelines that this logo needs 30 millimeters clearance either side. So I just put that in with a green line for illustration purposes. But you might just have it 100 millimeter logo within a, in this case, 160 millimeter square, 30 millimeters all the way around. Okay? So now, if I've got that logo, and same thing, if I make it 30%, it's 3 centimeters, 30 millimeters, and I've got the bleed information. So I know that if we go back to what we were using earlier, our line, and I say 0, and I do that, I now know that that logo is the right distance away from that. Obviously, I need to check what the guidelines are on that document. It might be more, so I'd have to adhere to the guidelines of that logo as a minimum. So anyway, the point is, if you're creating your logos and your icons, if they're always 100 millimeters, you just know just through the simple use of scale that you're getting the exact measure. Inline icons. So within text, and I can show you an example here. If I just open up Acrobat. So this is a book cover that I designed for Thames and Hudson, Forgotten Peoples of the Ancient World. And it was quite complex. There were lots of maps and there were lots of references to places. So like we've just done with the character styles, I created different character styles every time a river was mentioned. I created another character style with an inline graphic every time a citadel was mentioned. That then kind of gets a little bit more elaborate in the book. They're just two, and the reason we did that is because each of the civilizations that were mentioned in the book opened up with a spread like this, which then had the map, and we wanted there to be a kind of visual correlation between the text. So these are region names, so Mesopotamia. So we wanted to bring the styles of the maps into the text. So we made sure that the body copy of the text itself was quite neutral, but then there was always a visual connection using character styles or inline graphics. So that then kind of scaled across the whole book, just to sort of help the reader, so help them navigate the content, because it was, you know, it's all quite abstract, and none of these places really exist anymore. So one of the devices we then used was this idea of inline graphics, and any graphic, you know, in this case, the logo that we had, I can copy and paste that and put it anywhere within the text. So you can have icons within a text file. And why would you want to do that? Well, you know, again, if you're moving things around, you want to maintain the association. You don't want to put graphics behind text and trying to align things up and have them as separate elements. Sometimes it's beneficial to put them together. And you've got to kind of manage the situation of when that's most useful. You know, one prime example would be if you have got all your sort of social media channels on your business card, rather than aligning them up separately, you can put them all within the text file. One thing to bear in mind is that you might have to, I always say, you know, it's one thing working with these tools mathematically, but you always have to use your eye to deal with them optically. You might have to make a few adjustments just to bring the balance back in. So for example, here, what I've done on this icon, which is 4 millimeters and 4%, because that's what I needed it to be. Again, didn't need to have to measure anything, scale anything manually. I have just dropped a point on the baseline. So here, you know, we can move things up and down. I'd be very cautious and just use this sparingly, but in this case, it's kind of okay. If you've got it happening all over the place, it can cause you problems. So I would be cautious of use cases. I do it for, I tend to not use it for text at all. I make it work on the grid or otherwise. But in this case, with an inline graphic, just to bring the balance back in. Because if I don't put that in this instance, it's kind of top heavy. It sits on the same baseline. You know, obviously I can make it smaller, but I'm starting to compromise legibility. So you can work with the negative space here and move it down a little bit just to balance things out. Okay, inline graphics, next step. Object styles. That's gone a bit strange from this morning. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We can play around with that. Again, thinking about scale, you know, you might have designed a book and you're using a line that kind of visually creates a break between the chapter header and the opening paragraphs of text. You know, a line, not a big deal. But if you've used the style of a line across lots of pages, you might use it in lots of different areas. If you haven't created an object style, and in the corner here you have object styles. If you haven't created the object style, then this prospect of having to go in manually and change it again is just a nightmare. Here we have one. It's not really going to cause us too much. Just to illustrate the point, let's make many for the sake of it. Oh, that's because I've got it assigned to their selection. So there. But now if I change that style to blue and double line, you get the point. You know, here now in 6 places, could be 60, could be 300. It's all done in one hit. So that's just a line. Here I've got, you know, it might be a pull quote, for example. And on the pull quote, I want to put it in a block. I want to use a particular paragraph style. So here we can start creating relationships between object styles and paragraph styles. Again, it's a mind bender, so you need to kind of come back into this and play with it. You will have access to this document to play with. So, you know, if I want to change the background color here, I can just do it. And because these, like paragraph styles, were based on a master, these are based on that as a master. I only changed it here and it updated across here. So the same principle applies. Now, object styles are really, really powerful, and we've just really scratched the surface what you can do with them. So, you know, I really encourage you to kind of carve out, I don't know, half hour a week just to start learning some of these things, because when you come into a kind of professional setting and you're working part of a team and you're sharing stuff, and if somebody else has set it up in this way and you don't know how to kind of navigate it and it's unfamiliar to you, you can trip things up and cause problems across the document. This is where there is a kind of word of warning. It's a real kind of management of assets, and it sounds super, super technical. Once you get familiar with it, it's only a matter of familiarity, but the time it saves you in the long run is just endless. So, I need to demonstrate one other thing actually, just to be absolutely clear. We come to, so just to talk about paragraph styles again. So for example, here, I've got that paragraph and it's got an indent. If I change that and I've got that paragraph style selected, so for example, if I center it, you'll now note that it's got a plus at the end, which basically just states that it's that paragraph style with some modifications. And I can keep modifying it, but ideally that's not great. Things start falling apart. If I know that I now need a paragraph that's centered, rather than doing a modification, I can just go new paragraph style, name it whatever it is, underscore centered. And I can either keep it associated with the body copy one or base it on the one that I've just made it from. again, that kind of through experience, there's certain use cases where that works better in certain instances. If you ever want to kind of go back to what the default is, you just hold Option or Alt and you click on it, and it will default and take all the modifications away and just put it back to the original. And because Word has a similar kind of style sheet system, they're separate, but they're recognized as style sheets. So an author will impose a hierarchy on the manuscript. So it'd be a title, subtitle, header, subheader. So, they'll impose that structure and you'll inherit that structure, and that's what you have to work with. When you're then trying to derive styles and make kind of visual distinctions between them, that's when you're importing a manuscript, a Word file, into InDesign. And by importing that, when the style sheets have been set up in Word, it will bring in the style sheets or interpret the style sheet into InDesign. So when you import any kind of Word document, suddenly your paragraph style gets flooded with a new set of style sheets. It's like, oh, where's all that come from? If you have your hierarchy already set up, and for example, in that Word file, it might be they might use Arial for the body copy. And it's Arial 12 point, it's massive, and it's making the manuscript far too long. And the way that you kind of just switch it over, it's super simple. Once you've got them in, you go through systematically and you can delete. So if I take, for argument's sake, say this was a Word style sheet, if I delete it and it's body copy, that's not a good example, it's not being used. Has to have been used. So here, so if it's a Word style sheet and I'm deleting it, it obviously gives you the choice to replace it. So the body copy style that had been applied in Word, I can now say use mine, which is the right font, the right heading, whatever. Click, and it will, in that manuscript, which might be 60,000 words, it'll obviously update the style across the whole document. So by kind of just swapping out Word style sheets with InDesign style sheets, when you know the hierarchy, it takes 5 minutes because you're just swapping them out like for like, subhead for subhead, header one for header one. So yeah, very quickly you can sort of style up a full document. Then you can kind of drill in on a more kind of detailed level and then make kind of design decisions around how you want that type to work. So whether it's indented or whether it's like the paragraphs, if it's got a space in between, if it's a particular color, you've got all of that control. So, there's a huge amount to kind of dive into here. So that's what this sort of half an hour a week, just sort of making, breaking, and seeing really what can be achieved across the board.